So I feel like my journey kind of started just pretty much like everybody else. My journey really started at the beginning of 2020, well, in about March, April of 2020. My grandmother passed away, and she was, the matriarch of my family, really the glue that held my aunts and uncles and my cousins together. Now that we're older and we're all kind of living our own lives, she was definitely something that brought the family together more often. And so her passing was very tough for me. I was very close to her as a child. They were next door neighbors. Her and my grandfather were next door neighbors to me growing up. So I was very close with both of them, but in particular my grandmother, especially towards the end. So that was a really tough loss for me. 2020 was really all about loss for me. A lot of grieving. So I lost my grandmother. A few weeks later, a pretty serious relationship that I was in. We had been drifting apart for some time. And, when we did finally decide to end things, it was devastating for me. It was very tough to accept the reality that it was over, and that, someone that I felt was going to be in my life for a long time wasn't going to be there anymore. So the loss of having that partner, having that companion, having that relationship, again, just a really devastating blow for me. And then as we progressed further into 2020, COVID really took off, and the lockdowns happened and quarantine happened, and I wasn't laid off, but my hours that I was working at my job drastically were reduced. So I was only working about 8 hours a week. So the schedule that I was used to, the identity that I had at work, my purpose when it came to work was gone. The identities that I had as an individual, I was someone's grandson. I was someone's partner. I was someone's significant other. I was someone's employee. I was someone's good worker. All of those identities stopped. And it was tough. Cut to 2021, and I really fell into a very depressive state. I gained a lot of weight. I was self-harming. I was angry. I was angry at so many things. I was depressed. I was grieving. I was still processing the breakup that I went through. I was still processing the death of my grandmother. The changes that were taking place because of COVID and quarantine and the lockdowns, and how that it was going to affect my job and my income moving forward, and just so many things were on my mind, and I really took a deep dive into some really dark places. So back in 2020, I had actually decided to do a small little trip. We were in quarantine. I wasn't working that much. I decided that I needed to get out of my town. I needed to get out of my house. I needed to do something other than what I was doing, basically, which was eating a lot of food, watching a lot of TV, and not doing anything that really excited me. So I decided to take a little trip. It was like a 5 or 6 day trip, I can't remember, but I decided to drive to all 5 Great Lakes. So I drove up into New York, and then over into Michigan, and then down into Ohio, and I drove to all 5 Great Lakes over the course of 6 days. It was like 2,500 miles. And I absolutely loved it. So this was one of the biggest trips that I had done without someone going along with me. So, that was a big trip for me. That was the farthest that I had ever driven away from home. And it just kind of ignited something in me, and it reaffirmed and validated something in me of like, I can do this by myself. I could travel longer than 5 days. I could go farther than where I've been before. And it was just something, there was like a spark that was lit of, this is something I could see myself doing full time. But then I got back from this trip and the old habits started back up. The overeating, the over laziness, the over indulgence crept back in, and my life just became unfulfilling again. And there wasn't really much about my life that was bringing me joy. I was blessed. I was blessed at the time. I owned my home. I had a job. I had income. I had a vehicle. You know, I had so many things to be thankful and grateful for, but there was something in me that was missing. And again, it just took me back to a really dark place, and I was like that for pretty much half of 2021. And then one day I was at work, and this thought, just kept coming up in my mind of like, I need to do something different. I need a change. I need a new chapter. I need to move past some of these mental hurdles that I was jumping over every single day. I was in the bathroom at work where everyone finds great inspiration. And I said, you know, at this point in time, I was already watching van life videos on YouTube. I had a couple of books about van life and how to do it. I was following some people on Instagram. And I just, you know, that thought that's always in your head of like, man, I could do this if I really wanted to. And that day in the bathroom, I said, yeah, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. I'm young. I'm healthy. I have the time. When else am I going to have this opportunity to do this? So I decided that day that the next day I'm going to call a realtor. I'm going to put my house on the market. I'm going to come up with like a 6-month plan of what I need to do from here till then, before my trip started, of everything that I wanted to accomplish and get done before that actually happened. And I think for me, it was a really healing process because I wanted a fresh start. I wanted a new chapter. So everything that I owned, I would say 98% of everything that I owned in this 2-bedroom home, I either donated or I sold to friends. I had a couple different yard sales. I wanted to put the memories that I had. I didn't want to necessarily forget about them, but I just wanted them behind me. And a lot of the things that I had around me in my living space were very tangible and were connected to memories that I needed to move forward from, if that makes sense. So a lot of my furniture, a lot of my clothes, my bedding, kitchen type stuff, everything that I had, I just didn't want anymore. I didn't want to be connected to it anymore. So it was then that I decided, okay, well, what am I going to travel in? I didn't have enough money to buy like a big camper van, you know, one of these big Sprinter vans, and then the money to convert it and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't have the money to do that. So I thought, well, I've seen people do minivan type stuff. It's just me. I feel like I could make that work if I designed it out right and if I planned things right. I could probably make that work. So I started to do a little bit more research about other people that were using minivans as, you know, van campers. And I stumbled across this van, Bobby, at a local car dealership. And I was able to purchase him pretty quickly, actually. And I'd say about a month later, my house was sold. I had a 2-bedroom home, and now I'm living in a 12 square foot vehicle. But there's something very freeing about it because I just didn't feel attached to anything. And the tangible connections that I had to all of my things, replaceable things, it didn't really matter to me anymore. The memories were still there, but the connection to them all, I just didn't want anymore. So it was just very freeing to put everything that I had left into the van, everything that was kind of sentimental to me. And I went to my parents' house and I stayed there for about 2 weeks before I started my trip. So once all of that was done, my first day out on the road was February 6th. That was the day that I officially left. And I was on the road until June 17th, 2022. Yeah. So that was about 5 months of full-time traveling. And that's kind of where my YouTube channel started. I'd done a little bit of other videos kind of talking about how I got ready for the trip and everything. But that was really where my channel really started to come about. And I was filming more. And then from there, I just had, like, I had a whole sheet, like a whole itinerary of things that I wanted to do and see, because I had been planning this out for months and months, and visited about 16 or 17 national parks. I think I was in close to 20 different metro cities. And this was, you know, the first time that I had driven, well, this was the longest I'd ever driven anywhere, obviously. but it was the farthest I had ever been away from home, from my parents, especially by myself. So there was a lot of firsts for me on this trip. And, you know, I was in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Montana for about 10 minutes. I was in Wyoming, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and then back into Pennsylvania. So it was quite a trip for me. It was about 20,000 miles. And obviously you can go back further into, you can do the deep dive into my channel and you can see some of the things that I saw and experienced. I can honestly say, sitting here, that that was a time in my life that changed my life. It validated so many different things in me. One, that I was capable of doing that in general. But for me, it was just this life-changing, empowering, self-confidence boosting 5 months that I had ever experienced. And it just helped me feel closer to myself. It helped me reconnect with myself, more importantly. It helped me kind of value myself in a way that I don't think I ever really had. It enabled me to love myself more and really just respect myself as well, because I set a goal, I held myself accountable, I achieved that goal. So there was a certain level of self-respect that I was able to gain. I'm also very glad that I took that next step, and I chose to close the previous chapter of my life and open the next chapter. And it did. It really helped me get through some very difficult times. And there were definitely lonely days. Another question that I get asked a lot is, don't you ever get lonely? And, you know, my answer to that kind of always shocks people, but I have never been uncomfortable with being alone, right? There's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. For me, I feel more lonely around other people than when I'm just by myself. I had experienced that in previous relationships. I had experienced that in previous friend groups. I've always had that feeling in my life of, I don't know where I fit in here. And just always kind of been that person that just felt like a little bit of an outsider. Like I wasn't really understood. And so for me, it's just easier to be alone. And I don't know if that's the most healthy perspective. I will say though, making videos and just talking to my phone like this out in the middle of the woods, like most people do, that really did help. That really does help when it comes to those moments of loneliness. You don't feel quite as alone because you feel like you're talking to someone and you feel like you're being heard. You're not being talked over. You're not being dismissed or anything like that. So doing my YouTube channel, doing my videos and my content really did help me feel a little bit more connected to even just myself, because I was alone, yet I knew that there were people who were going to be seeing this, who were going to be watching me, who might be checking in on me. So that was very comforting for me. So cut to the end of my trip, you know, after 5 months of traveling, I knew in the weeks leading up to coming back home that, you know, things were going to change. Things were going to be different. It was good to see my family. It was good to reconnect. It was good to tell everybody some stories and share some videos and some pictures that I have with family and friends. But one thing that I have found is there was a certain level of depression that took over once I got back. And in a lot of different ways, it felt like I never left. In a lot of different ways, it felt like what I had just experienced didn't happen. And that really took a toll on me for a long time. That really stuck with me because I had the evidence that I had gone somewhere, because I had the videos and I had the pictures. But once I got back and into familiar areas and familiar sites and familiar people, I just felt like, did I really go? Did I really do this? And it was very tough. It was a hard realization of, I guess that's it. You know, I'd say the next 6 months was a lot of that thinking of, did I even go? anywhere. But then things did seem to kind of settle back down for me, and I was able to become more of like a weekend warrior type person. So I kept the van the same way I had it throughout all of my trip. So I try to travel a lot. 2022 was all about travel for me because even once I got back from my trip, I didn't stop. I went to the beach, I went to Shenandoah, I went to a couple different places that I had to travel to. And I think doing these little trips has really helped me kind of get out of that funk that I had when I first came back. I try to go to places that I find interesting, and maybe you all find interesting as well. And I just try to make the most out of the time that I'm given. And that was something that I have struggled with in the past, of just being present and just kind of not taking things for granted. And that's definitely been a big lesson for me over the past couple of years. So, throughout the process of the past 3 years, what started out as a lot of loss of people that were very close to me, people that meant everything to me, to the depressive states that I went through, the anger and the grief, and the loss of identity that I went through. And I'm so grateful that I did. I'm so fortunate. Like, I really don't want to discount that at all to anybody that's watching this. I am beyond fortunate. I am beyond blessed. I am beyond even privileged to have had this opportunity. So I hope that this video was able to maybe answer some questions that some people have had, because I've never really done a video about my story and how I ended up here and with Bobby and on some of the adventures that I've been on. I just want to thank everybody for making it to the end of another video of mine. I really do appreciate it. And until the next time that I see you, please take care. See ya.